In today's corporate environment, the merging of two or more departments or functional areas is commonplace. In the previous episode, we discussed two of the four mistakes managers often make when such a merger occurs. The failure of managers to plan for such a merger of departments, and the failure to adequately integrate members of both departments. In this episode, we'll discuss the second two mistakes: a failure to be sensitive to the different management styles of the two departments, and a failure to address the issue of staff morale. Hi, I'm Rick Kendall.
And I'm Fred Ball.
Welcome to Management Mastery. The purpose of these podcasts is to share what each of us has learned about good and bad management in our combined over 40 years of experience, both as managers and executive coaches. During that time, we've coached managers at every level in companies from Fortune 100s to brand new startups in all major businesses, including nonprofits, government, and education. So whether you're just starting in your first management position or are an experienced manager looking to strengthen your management skills, we know our podcast will be valuable to you.
The third mistake is a failure to be sensitive enough to the likely differences in management style, ways of communicating, monitoring performance, and other organizational dynamics that will exist between the two groups. And what that's going to do is it's going to change the department culture. And it'll probably create a culture that is different from either of the original departments. It's important that you are sensitive to this development and respond accordingly, especially in terms of how frequently you communicate with the members of the new combined department.
Yeah, you want to know what the other manager, assuming they're still around, sees as important similarities and differences between your two departments, and where do they think that there may be issues in terms of the general working environment, and where do they think there'll be commonalities where things will mesh fairly easily. And it's important to understand how these two department cultures are similar as well as different so that you can anticipate these issues. And you want to get a sense from the other manager of what those differences are and what they suggest you do to minimize any potential problems.
And as you gather this information, this is going to be especially important in terms of your communication. There's a real risk of misunderstandings, particularly among the members of the other department who may not be familiar with your way of communicating and how it might differ from that of the other manager. This is a really important issue. And you need to be able to say to both staffs, both your current staff and the staff that you will be inheriting, look, if you don't understand something that I say at a meeting, it's your responsibility to come to me and say that you didn't understand and you'd like further discussion about it so that we can resolve this. This happens often in the coaching that we do, where we're talking to the person that we're talking, and they're saying that one of the people who report to them just don't get it, or they don't understand what the communication that's being made. And so we check with them to say, are you asking that person to come to you if they don't understand what it is that you're communicating?
Oh, that is so important, and it is such an area, and we've both encountered this in our coaching experience where another thing that happens is that two people from one from each of the previous departments hear the same thing from the new boss and hear two entirely different things.
That's true.
Yeah, how the new boss communicates. The one person does because they've been working with that boss for a while. The other person misunderstands. And this is compounded when you're dealing with written communication, texts or emails, because you lose so much of the subtlety that you have with face-to-face communication. So you really need to, as the boss, be very sensitive to that and ask, one technique we haven't talked about in this episode is just asking people, when you give instructions, to play them back to you. What did I say I wanted you to do? What do you understand I've asked you to do? Or what do you understand our procedure is, or whatever. And the other problem I've encountered in my coaching is where you've got a boss who's not communicative, who holds back, and their staffs have to sort of guess what they want or guess why they want them to do a certain thing. And those problems can come up too. And sometimes it's on the staff to talk to one another. And what did he mean by that? Why did she say that? Those sorts of conversations. And frankly, I don't know how you encourage that in the combined staff, but you need to. That it's all right, you should be talking to one another, so you're all sure you're singing off the same song sheet.
Absolutely. That is so true, that you need to, and it's going to take work to continue to get people to respond and to talk about it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And the fourth mistake that managers make is that they fail to adequately address staff morale and bonding between the new joint staff, so that because there's going to be suspicion and there's going to be a standoffishness. I mean, it's the newbies versus the old hands kind of thing. And so you really, as the manager, need to work to have events, have opportunities for the two staffs to get together in informal situations. Maybe it's a joint lunch or an after-work party, whatever. But you need to be sensitive to there are going to be tensions between the two groups because they're not as familiar. This will vary with how much the two departments had worked together to begin with, but you need to really work on that, because there is going to be a period of uncertainty amongst all the staff, and rumors are going to fly, and there's going to be hesitation about what's expected and what can be expected. So you really need to be sensitive to that, particularly among the group that's being merged in with your existing group.
And as Rick was saying, this is why communication is so important, and it should be open and candid. Especially, not especially, but it can be that there will be significant staff changes, perhaps through layoffs, promotions, or reassignments, when this kind of a thing occurs. And it's especially important that these are discussed in a timely manner. So a couple of things can happen at this point. Sometimes, if you as the manager don't communicate enough on things that you could communicate with, then what's going to happen is that there's going to be a negative impact on the part of staff, because many times they will know what it is that you have not talked with them about, or they will come to their own conclusions about what you're talking about. And so sometimes in our coaching, we will encourage the person that we're coaching to communicate with their staff, to let them know to be involved. There's also a flip side. And the flip side is that depending upon what you have learned, there are times when it is better not to talk too much, not to bring things out. And so sometimes what can happen is you can, in an effort to try and have open communication, you may start to say too much and get people upset. about things that they don't need to be upset about at a given period of time. They'll find out as time goes on, but this requires on your part, a real understanding and an ability to think things through and say, does it make sense for me to tell them about this at this point? Or am I better served, and are they better served by waiting a little bit before I tell them?
It is such a balancing act. I totally agree. And the thing is, I mean, it's like the nature of information is that it abhors a vacuum. That if people think there's information out there and you're not telling them, they'll find out. And if they can't find out, they'll find out anyway. And misinformation and people guessing what's going to happen can be just as dangerous as telling them. But you're right. I mean, sometimes you can say too much, but the boss who thinks that, my staff don't know or aren't going to find out is living in a bit of a fantasy land, because they've got ways of finding out. Whether the information they get is accurate or not is a different question, but you always have to be sensitive to that. And if it's important, they'll either come up with an answer or they'll get an answer. So you need to be on guard about that all the time.
And it goes back to what we said as the first of the mistakes that managers make in terms of planning. Planning comes back in here as well. You have to plan and think through, if I say this, what are the reactions that I'm going to get? And is it better for me to speak now, or is it better for me to hold that piece of information so that we can talk about it a little later?
No, absolutely. Like I said, it's a real balancing act. And it's also important that as far as you can, as we said earlier, that you have joint social activities, especially at the beginning, so team members get to know one another, and that you make it a point to celebrate successes jointly, so that everybody feels that everybody on the team wins when things go well, and that it impacts everybody when when things don't go well, and that they all have to work together for the overall success of the joint departments, which are really now one department.
Yep. I'm doing a coaching case right now where the manager is not someone who tends to think about social activities. And so what I have encouraged them to do, and they have done, is they actually have appointed within the department a sort of a social director. It's an informal job, but that person's role is to try and make sure that every so often they do some kind of an activity that will be good for the group as a whole.
Oh, that's brilliant, and that's another reason why an outside coach can really add to an organization's ability to succeed, because it brings in a perspective that you may not have just by being, self-contained as an organization.
So in this episode, we covered 2 of the common mistakes that managers can make when another department is merged with theirs. We've covered how the manager of the new group must address the differences in operating styles of the 2 groups, and the fact that the merged group will be a combination of the 2 and probably different from each in some key ways, such as establishing their own culture. Finally, we talked about the importance of immediately addressing the need for social and morale-boosting activities to facilitate bonding between the 2 groups and merging them into a single integrated team.
We hope you have found this podcast useful, and we'll come back again for more management mastery. If you have any comments about this or any of our episodes, or would like to find out more about our other services, including one-on-one coaching and group seminars for managers, visit our website at careercoachclass.com. Thanks for listening.